The Seahorse Effect by Seahorse Steinbecker. Chapter 25. Oh no! Anakin, what? Obi-Wan stammered, but he didn't get to finish. With a strong force push, Anakin sent the other men flying down the hall and into the small bedroom. Then he locked the door and windows and ran out the front door. He careened down the path, almost slamming into the ship at the end of it, Obi-Wan's fighter. Quickly, Anakin disabled several different systems he remembered Obi-Wan complaining he could never fix, including the comm unit. Then he ran through the woods again, past the house and into the backyard. After he disabled his fighter as well, he turned on the still functioning comm system. He punched the start recording button and stammered out, "Padme, Obi-Wan found out. I'll try to keep him here, but you have to help me. He'll never listen to me, but he'll listen to you. Please get her as soon as you..." The back door banged open behind him and Obi-Wan stormed out onto the small field. Anakin quickly sent off the message and managed to unplug the system from its power source before a hand gripped his shoulder and roughly spun him around. The Master almost glowered at him. "Anakin!" "Master, I can explain." "Start with that!" the older man demanded as he jabbed a finger at Anakin's distended middle. He knocked the hand away and glowered back at his master. Then he sighed and his shoulders sagged slightly. "Can we talk about this back inside?" the knight asked tiredly. Obi-Wan studied him for a moment, very much suspicious. Was Anakin trying to get him back in the house so he could be contained? He glanced at the comm unit. "Who were you talking to?" Was it one of the separatists? But that didn't explain the disturbing swelling in Anakin's body. Maybe the younger man was ill, had caught some sort of disease or parasite. Yes, that made more sense. Obi-Wan decided to test that theory. With the others still silent, Obi-Wan reached out into the force around him, quickly honing in on Anakin's force presence. There was no sign of sickness, none of the corruption that should have permeated the energy around his old Padawan. But wait, there was something different. The energy all life generated was thick around his stomach area, thicker than it should have been. He poked at that area, not noticing how Anakin flinched from his force-connected state. Then, like two bright stars dimmed by the light of a brilliant full moon, Obi-Wan saw them. Two force presences, one much stronger than the other, brushed up against his probing mind. He reeled back out of his searching state and grabbed his old Padawan. "We have to get you to a med center, Annie. There's something inside you." "I know." Anakin got in. "I'll explain, I will, but first, let's go back inside." Very confused and still suspicious, Obi-Wan followed him back inside. In the kitchen, Anakin sat in one of the dining table chairs, and Obi-Wan took a seat across from him. "Well?" he tried not to growl out. Anakin folded his hands over his middle and asked, "Do you remember Senator Padme?" "Yes," Obi-Wan admitted. "But what does she have to do with this?" The younger man sighed. "Master, I'm trying to tell you. Would you just listen?" Obi-Wan huffed but didn't speak, not even to correct Anakin about calling him Master. "Well, I fell in love with her. We got married right after the Clone Wars started." Obi-Wan opened his mouth to ask how Anakin could be so foolish, but the glare shut him up. "About 6 months ago, when I came back from another mission, she came to meet me at the landing pad because she had something to tell me." He took a deep breath and took the plunge. "She was pregnant." He'd been watching his old master's face, so he knew the moment Obi-Wan put two and two together. A slight widening of the eyes, and then they locked onto his stomach, where his hands rested protectively. He continued on. "I had a vision, over and over, of Padme dying in childbirth. The twins never made it. I couldn't let that happen, so I moved them inside me instead." He looked up at the other Jedi, whose eyes had moved from his abdomen to his face. "They'll be here in about 2 months. Obi-Wan fell back in his chair, suddenly 10 years older. "Anakin, how could you be so foolish? Do you know how much of the code you've broken?" He got up and started pacing. The younger Jedi watched him with a measure of incredulity. "So you believe me?" He ran a hand through his hair and looked back at Anakin. "I felt 2 new presences inside you, and..." A small unconscious smile lifted his lips, entirely unexpected. "It does explain a few things I noticed before you went on sabbatical." Then the smile vanished as Obi-Wan looked away from him. "How could you do something so dangerous?" The knight startled a bit. "Dangerous?" "There's nothing dangerous about this." He fought down the urge to shout at his former apprentice and said, "Anakin, you are a male. Your body is not equipped to carry children." The other man nodded, even though Obi-Wan couldn't see it. "I knew that. That's why I did research about the hippocampini race, the human body, and about artificial wombs. I even went to Kamino to study theirs and learned healing so I could keep an eye on myself. I knew what I was doing, Master. I made sure it was safe."
Something in that statement grabbed Obi-Wan's attention.
"You were on Kamino? Were you the one who found out about the chip?" He turned around in time to see Anakin's nod of confirmation. Thinking hard, he went over the report again in his mind. To him, it had seemed curious, bordering on suspicious. If Anakin had written it, that did make more sense. He sat back down at the table, avoiding looking at his old apprentice. "Anakin, I have to report this to the council." Anakin lurched back. "No! You're turning, Anakin. You just can't see it." Obi-Wan rubbed at his forehead. "Our whole purpose is to maintain balance. What you're doing goes against that balance in so many ways." "But Jedi also respect life," Anakin argued before the other could continue. "Our purpose is to save lives wherever we can. That's all I'm doing." "No, you're letting your emotions, your love for them, affect your decisions." "Love is not an emotion," Anakin shouted at his old master, leaping to his feet. Dizziness fogged up his senses, and he gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. Obi-Wan noticed and got up as well. He walked around the table and put a hand on the younger man's back. But Anakin let go of the table and stared into his face. "Love is a choice someone makes every day to put someone else before themselves." He splayed a hand over his middle. "I love my children, and if this is what I have to do to keep them safe, I will." Luke kicked him in the side. Anakin flinched but smiled as he pressed a hand to the place Luke had kicked. He suddenly realized how tired he was. "Look, can we talk about this later?" Obi-Wan saw the exhausted slouch to his old Padawan's shoulders and relented. "I won't tell the council yet, Annie, but you have a great deal to explain. Understand?" He watched until Anakin gave him a nod. Then the young man retreated towards the living room. Obi-Wan stared at the younger man's retreating back. Now that he knew about Anakin's pregnancy, and didn't that sound strange? He could see bits of it here and there, like the way his back arched a bit more than normal. I suppose his center of gravity's off, he thought, but he's certainly adapting well to the whole thing. Obi-Wan thought about what that might mean, and decided to look a bit deeper once he was alone. Obi-Wan went back into the guest room, carefully not locking the door and unlocking the window, and sat on the bed. He folded his legs under him and meditated on his surroundings until he entered a state where he could feel the Force intimately. It pulsed within him in time with his heartbeat, and he gloried in the feeling, letting it soothe his consciousness. But eventually, he moved his attention outward. The jungle around the house teemed with the living Force, varied and powerful, wild and beautiful. It tugged at his fringes, asking him to come and play with it, dance with it, wrestle with it. Maybe I will, he thought, delighted by its sheer richness. After I've dealt with Anakin. Slowly, he narrowed the field of sensation to the interior of the house, where the most abundant source of life energy was Anakin, and the children latching onto him. With far more reluctance than his brief excursion into the jungle's living Force, he reached for his old apprentice. Obi-Wan knew Anakin's Force presence very well, powerful but minutely touched with strands of darkness. More Jedi than the Order would care to admit had a strain of it running through them, especially among the older ranks. After all, one couldn't fight a war without casualties. The difference with Anakin was that his had been there for a very long time, perhaps even before he left Tatooine. That was what made the Council hesitant about him in the first place. That streak of darkness was what Obi-Wan was looking for now. His Force presence is bigger than the last time I did this, he thought as he closed in on the small sun that was Anakin. Of course, there are 3 there now. He ran his senses over the life energy, testing its attributes. There's the love I sensed earlier. And tiredness. Well, I expected that. A small strand of dark caught his attention and he grabbed onto it. Fear, very clear and pure, swept through Obi-Wan. But fear of what exactly? He studied the strand more closely and noticed it was bundled with two others, one blazing brightly, the other more subdued. He reached for the duller one first. Protectiveness, hot and determined, almost made Obi-Wan release the strand. He checked for malice or anger, but there was none. I think I know what the last strand is going to be, he thought, but he released the protective streak and closed his senses around the final thread. Love, unconditional and powerful, swept through him again, 1,000 times greater than the fear. Quickly he let go of the strand, and in doing so noticed something he'd missed previously. The bundle wasn't 3 individual strands. The fear and protectiveness were like fibers that had frayed slightly from the cord of love. My arrival brought them to the foreground, he realized, but Annie didn't act on them as far as I can tell. That surprised him a little. The Anakin he knew jumped into action, usually without thinking. But all throughout this process, he'd thought out every step carefully before acting on it. He drew back into his own mind and out of the deep meditation. He unfolded his legs and let himself fall back against the mattress. He and Anakin were in no immediate danger, so Obi-Wan had time to rest. He'd look at it again with a fresher mind in a few hours.